Just when England was starting to rebuild after Rome's withdrawal and the slow rise of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, a new kind of fear arrived. It didn't come with a declaration of war. It didn't march across borders. It appeared on the horizon, low and fast like a shadow skimming the water. Longships, oars, a square sail. And then, before a village could even ring a warning bell, the shore was full of strangers. The Viking Age in England began as raids, but it felt like a curse. The earliest attacks were sudden, violent, and confusing. One day, a coastal community was tending fields, repairing nets, living ordinary life. The next day, smoke rose, people were dead or taken, and the attackers were already gone. The pattern was terrifying. Strike, seize, vanish. England had fought neighbors on land for generations, but this was different. There was no time to gather an army, no clear enemy camp to punish. The sea made the enemy mobile, and mobility made fear spread faster than news. Monasteries were among the first targets, not because Vikings hated religion, but because monasteries were rich and lightly defended. They held silver, stored food, and had few warriors. When places like Lindisfarne were attacked, the shock spread far beyond the coast. Monasteries were not just churches, they were centers of learning and memory. They kept books, they recorded events, they trained the few people who could read and write. To see them violated sent a message into the English mind. If even sacred ground can be broken, then nowhere is safe. The Vikings were not chaotic beasts. They were organized, disciplined, and technologically ahead in the one domain that mattered most: movement. Their ships were light enough to pull onto a beach and strong enough to cross open sea. They could slip into river mouths and push far inland, turning England's waterways into invasion roads. A town that believed it was protected by distance could be attacked from its own riverbank. Speed plus surprise made small Viking groups feel like a much larger force. England's political structure made everything worse. The island was still divided into rival kingdoms: Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, Wessex, each suspicious of the other. When Vikings struck one region, neighboring rulers often hesitated, calculating their own advantage. There was no shared command, no national warning system, no unified fleet. Division turned raids into a sustained crisis, because the Vikings never had to fight England. They only had to fight pieces of it, one at a time. At first, many raids were seasonal. Vikings arrived in warmer months, took what they could, and left. But as they learned England's weaknesses, their strategy evolved. They began to winter on English soil. Temporary camps became fortified bases. Raids turned into occupation. Then came larger armies, especially in the 9th century, when the so-called Great Heathen Army arrived with the clear intention to seize territory, not just treasure. The great change was scale. What began as quick theft became a struggle for land. Fear rearranged daily life. Farms were abandoned. Families fled inland. Some were enslaved and sold across seas. Others survived by making bargains, paying protection, or simply enduring. Coastal life narrowed. People learned to live with one ear open, listening for horns, dogs, or the crackle of fire. Markets shrank, then shifted. A port might empty while an inland settlement suddenly grew crowded. Even conversation changed, because fear changes what people talk about. Watchmen, hiding places, escape routes, and which path leads to safety. English kings responded in different ways. Some fought and were crushed. Some negotiated. Some paid tribute, Danegeld, hoping money would buy peace. But tribute was a trap. It drained resources and taught the Vikings that England could be pressured. Paying for safety proved weakness, and weakness invited return. Worse, tribute created a brutal choice for rulers. Do you protect your people now by paying? Or do you risk everything on a battle you might lose and leave your kingdom exposed? And yet, this is where the story becomes more than terror. The Viking threat forced England to learn a hard truth. The real danger was not only the raiders, it was England's inability to act as one. Over time, this lesson burned into the English memory. Divided kingdoms are easy prey. Coordination is survival. Systems matter. In Wessex, that lesson produced a turning point. Under Alfred, later remembered as the Great, survival stopped being a series of desperate reactions and became a strategy. Alfred fought, lost, regrouped, and learned. He understood that if attacks are sudden, defense must already be ready. After surviving near collapse, he rebuilt not only armies but routines. He strengthened a network of fortified towns, burhs, placed so ordinary people could reach safety quickly and defenders could respond before raiders could loot and escape. Walls, garrisons, and planned response routes turned empty panic into organized resistance. When Alfred finally gained breathing room, he made a hard, practical peace with the Viking leader Guthrum. The point was not romance, it was time. Agreements and boundaries helped freeze the bleeding, and those boundaries later became the foundation of what people called the Danelaw, areas where Scandinavian rule and custom held authority. England was not united, but it was learning to manage territory like a system. Lines, responsibilities, obligations, and predictable response. Alfred also began to challenge the Vikings on their own terms by taking the sea seriously. Early English ships were imperfect, but the idea mattered. You cannot defend an island while surrendering the water around it. The point was not glory. The point was time. If the enemy arrives in hours, your system must respond in hours, not days. This way of thinking, logistics, readiness, coordination, was a quiet revolution, and it would echo centuries later when England built fleets to control routes far beyond its own shores. The Viking Age reshaped culture too. Scandinavian words entered English speech. Place names changed. Trade routes expanded through Viking networks. Some Vikings settled, farmed, married, and became part of local life. Conflict existed alongside integration. That is what makes the period so powerful. It wasn't a simple story of invaders and victims. It was a long collision that changed England from the inside, blending customs in some places while hardening identities in others. By the time the Viking pressure peaked, the crisis was no longer only coastal. Great bands moved along rivers, seized towns, and demanded submission. Northumbria and East Anglia were hit hard. Mercia was weakened. People who had once argued over local borders now faced a question that cut deeper. What does it mean to belong to a land that cannot protect you? In that question, you can hear the early heartbeat of a future nation. Fear did not create unity by kindness. It created unity by necessity. The Burr system mattered because it changed the rhythm of war. A raiding force survived by speed and escape. Fortified towns denied that escape. If a community could shelter behind walls and defenders could arrive quickly, the raiders lost their greatest advantage. Alfred also organized service so the fighting force did not vanish when harvest season arrived. Instead of everyone leaving at once, duty could rotate, keeping a portion of men available while others farmed. It sounds simple, but it is the kind of disciplined planning that turns panic into endurance. Even record-keeping became a weapon. Chronicles and letters helped leaders remember patterns, where attacks landed, when they returned, which rivers were vulnerable, which treaties held, and which broke. The Vikings forced England to treat information as power. And once a society learns that lesson, it rarely forgets. England was learning to survive in long time, not moments. The Viking terror years did not destroy England, but they broke illusions. They exposed how fragile a divided land can be. They pushed England toward unity, toward systems, toward stronger leadership, and they planted a lesson that will echo through the later empire. If you want to be safe, you must control the routes that connect you to danger. And just as England began adapting to this storm, another force was preparing across the sea, an invasion that would not come to raid and leave, but to rule. The Normans were coming.